Hey there, welcome to Kendama Jendale and the Fake News. It is Thursday, April 6th at 2:43 a.m. I couldn't really sleep, so I decided to go ahead and do a little show for you. Here's just a reminder that I released a new song. It's a disco rap metal song. I think it's quite good. Go ahead and check that out on the Jendale SoundCloud. And I just also want to say that this podcast is brought to you by Swag Valley. Swag Valley is the best rap trio on this side of the planet. You can find it by going to SoundCloud and typing Swag Valley and ignoring Darian Swag Daily, Sweet Valley, EYC to swagstar.com. This is where you start to get into Swag Valley. You can find the entire Swag Valley mixtape. It's the fifth result down when you search YouTube for Swag Valley. So go ahead and do that. Check out the mixtape. It's a pretty strong showing. Appreciate your support. Appreciate all of you going in to watch it. Let's read some news. Okay, so you wouldn't know it from this headline, but this is actually a headline about the chemical weapons attack in Syria. There was a chemical weapons attack in Syria. I don't know exactly. I just saw that it happened on the television. I think a number of people died, like 200 or something like that. Um, I think they've suggested that it's sarin gas that was used, but it's not really clear. I don't really. It frustrates me that there aren't still headlines about the chemical attack, but maybe we're just too far removed from the, you know, from from the cycle. Anyway, so this is gonna be a big test for the Donald Trump administration, right? Because Donald Trump has kind of sold himself as a I don't want to use the pejorative term isolationist, but somebody who's reluctant to get involved in foreign intervention. Um, it seems to me I think I think a big chunk of Trump supporters are extremely pro peace and they're anti-interventionist. And I've actually been very impressed with Trump supporters' foreign policy and awareness of foreign policy during this whole dialogue. Let's check out the Donald subreddit. Um, because when something like this happens, it's important to check the narratives and see what's going on. So the main Donald story is that Ben Carson uncovered a bunch of fraud and mismanagement. This is a misleading headline very much. I think there is quite a bit of fraud, but I think the number is closer to 50 billion, and the mismanagement part of it is going to be 500 billion. So they're conflating these two terms to make it look like the Obama administration has much more um, thorough corruption. I'm sure the Obama administration has a lot of corruption. Don't get me wrong. I think this is a misrepresentation. So here's Paul Joseph Watson. This is the info or not Infowars. He's a Prison Planet guy. I think he's worked with Infowars at some point. But dear Donald Trump, you are being manipulated by the same scam they pulled in 2013. No regime change in Syria. Sick. I like that. To me, that's cool. That's what the type of rhetoric I can get behind. I like that he uses the phrase regime change. Um, I think that's shows an awareness of contemporary American foreign policy that isn't really generally present in the American political dialogue. Um, they're talking about the Susan Rice thing. Oh, let's go back here. Um, John McCain, who Trumpers really hate, is on Fox News right now with a full blown war plan to attack Syria. Um, Based Ron Paul says Syria gas attack could be false flag. Don't call for the false flag. Oops, ops, tweeting about the chemical attack before it happens. So I'm going to say it loud for everyone to hear. We don't want a war with Syria. So you can kind of get an idea of the Trump constituency and what their foreign policy is. And this is, to me, one of the compelling things about the Trump constituency. I think Trump is basically doing exactly what Hillary would do in this situation. He's doubling down, he's becoming more secure. It'll remain to see whether or not he decides to send forces or do other things Um, if this is hypothetically a false flag attack, it does make sense. It is coming at the height of this Susan Rice scandal, right? It's coming at the height of Trump winning that narrative. It's also, I tend to think when you have things like chemical weapons involved, that's the type of thing where you potentially can see intelligence agencies or shady people starting to be culpable. I don't know what just happened to my. They're starting to be culpable for things like arms deals. You know, the CIA sells arms, the CIA sells drugs. Somewhere in there, a chemical weapon gets thrown in, and all of a sudden, these weird rogue groups have access to chemical weapons and can stage terrorist attacks with them. And it's all very coincidental and very sort of, I don't want to say necessarily it's planned, like top down planned, but it's definitely there's a like a method in place where that happens. So let's talk about this surveillance thing, right? Susan Rice is this Obama advisor. I haven't followed this story closely. You can go back and look at what I've been saying through this entire surveillance scandal is that Trump is playing the Democrats, and that he cannot simultaneously both be under surveillance and also um, have no Russian connections. I didn't explain that well. In other words, if he is connected to the Russians, then he was under surveillance. And so the Democrats are arguing both that he is connected to the Russians and also that he's not under surveillance. So the Democrats are literally arguing with themselves. So I haven't paid attention to the details of this story necessarily because they're not important. The details aren't important. Trump does this thing where the way that Trump controls the news cycle is he wins the argument, right? He wins the argument immediately. He frames the argument in such a way where he's going to be right. He's got proof that there's surveillance, right? I don't know this. I'm just speaking hypothetically. It makes sense that he would have proof that there's surveillance, right? And then he makes an outlandish claim. Oh, there's surveillance. And he offers nothing to support it or nothing to do anything. And then he waits. And he lets the liberals stumble over themselves, and he lets his opposition stumble over themselves, and he lets them get within a hair's breadth of seeming like they're catching up to his narrative, and then he drops something else, right? He has Congressman Nunes come and visit him at the White House and read the evidence, and all of a sudden he's got evidence to explain it, right? And then he waits for the liberals to try to catch up and try to get their stuff going, and they almost do it, and then all of a sudden Susan Rice is in the crosshairs. And don't forget, so 2 weeks ago, right, people were arguing Trump has no evidence for surveillance, right? And now people are arguing whether or not something called unmasking is legal surveillance, right? Whether unmasking is against the law or not against the law. And it's this semantic, right? It's the routine revealing of identities that are collected under incidental surveillance, right? Which is like, I mean, you might as well call it wiretapping and put quotes around it, right? I mean, this is not a good. The people arguing that Trump wasn't being surveilled have really backed off their original point and moved the goalposts as far as what it takes for them to win an argument. That's all I'm saying. And so it's almost important not to get lost in the details of these things because that's all they are. Is they're goofy drama details. They're the next episode in season 1 of the Trump administration. It's all a TV thing, right? That strategy that I described, where Trump preemptively wins an argument and then lets the opponents catch up, and then launches his next step or whatever, and then he lets his opponents pretend to catch up, but he's never within any danger of getting beat. And that strategy is really similar in a way to a weekly television show, right? With cliffhanger endings. And you stay tuned next week on the Trump administration. And then, everything's just a crappy reality TV show now. Um, okay, I think that's about it. This is also kind of interesting, but I think it's kind of being overplayed. And I think it's sort of going into this narrative of people are trying to make Trump. I think people are trying to make Trump look like a warmonger. Will look like a Clintonite. Um, and Trump, I think one of the big Trump masterstrokes, right, is that he basically, in this weird way, he ran as an authoritarian pacifist, right? Where he's like extremely strong on terror, but he also couches himself, and you get these sort of glimpses that he's extremely skeptical of the war on terror in some places. Um, and, he's extremely, he's a law and order candidate. But you get the sense that he understands that a lot of laws are very bad and very abusive, but he never commits to that. And you never quite know what he is. And I think a lot of Trump supporters are going to find that they got Obama and they voted for a hope and change candidate that doesn't follow through. But so far, I haven't seen Trump do anything he hasn't promised to do. Right? Where Trump basically promised to be an authoritarian, and he is being an authoritarian. And it's not really any different than what Hillary's authoritarianism would have been, or it's just it's just standard American authoritarianism. So yeah, interesting time, but also, boy, the plot to this whole thing just moves at a snail's pace, and I just find it incredibly boring. All right, go ahead, follow us on Twitter, Kendama Jendale at Kendama Jendale. Yeah, take it easy, guys. This has been Kendama Jendale and the fake news.